One of my personal favorite developer publishers of all time is definitely got to be Sony. They've made some awesome titles over the years. They made stuff like Ape Escape, Ico, Shadow of the Colossus, stuff like even Folklore on PS3, and games like Gravity Rush. I think Nintendo for sure gets more of the praise for their first-party titles. I mean, they got Mario, Zelda, and Pokemon, everyone knows those, but I think Sony's for sure is underrated at least a little bit, because they make some pretty quality titles that come across on each platform. The newest Astrobot game that came out a couple months ago, I actually platinumed this game. This game is freaking fantastic. I just wish there were more games that came out by then. They usually use other developers and they'll just publish the games, which is cool and all, but I like to see what Sony has in store to make too. In the early 2000s, the PS1 was kind of withering off and PS2 was the new thing. Everyone was kind of jumping ship and moving on to the next gaming generation. Well, that didn't stop Sony of Europe, because they decided to make one more game, and this game was C-12 Final Resistance. I've actually mentioned this game a couple times on this channel on a couple list videos. I only played a couple of levels though to get footage, but this time I actually sat down and played all the way through it, and I definitely want to talk about this. So, is this game at all worth your time to check out and play? I'm here today to review C-12 Final Resistance for the PS1. C-12 Final Resistance was developed and published by Sony of Europe. It actually came out in 2002 in North America, but the game was actually released earlier in 2001 in Europe only. Japan never got this game. Not sure why it took over a year to get this game, especially with the PS2 being out, but Sony of Europe is known for making other games too, like the Transformers game that was their first title on the PS1. They even made Frogger, which is hilarious. I used to have this as a kid. And the Medieval games, which on the back of the cover, it even says from the creators of Medieval. So we know this game is at least in good hands. The plot of this game is there's an alien invasion happening on Earth and they're just destroying everything. Well, you, Riley Vaughn, you're a lieutenant for this resistance that you're in, and you get dropped off this airship into this city, and you have to infiltrate this outpost to save your guys while these aliens are there to attack and you gotta kill them. Well, you find out more details about these aliens and what they plan to do, so you gotta stop them from trying to destroy Earth and save Earth too, as well as your comrades along the way. C-12 is a third-person shooter, as you can tell from the gameplay, but it definitely has action-adventure elements going for it as well. The controls are definitely unique to this game, and it does support the DualShock controls, as I've mentioned in my other videos before, on my list videos. And the controls, basically, you can use the D-pad, but the left stick moves you, the right stick is your camera, and the DualShock controls are great with this game. They're very, very good, they utilize it very well. X is your action button, as well as your shooting button, or attack button with your blade. The square button acts as a secondary attack on your guns, and you can shoot like grenades or advanced missiles and such when you hold the square button down. Circle can help you climb on top of boxes as well as crouch. L1 helps cycle through your weapons. R1 is your target lock, and you'll be using this quite a lot, especially with enemies. You don't have to use this, but it definitely helps with aiming. Triangle is your shield, and you can only use this if you have enough shield energy, and this thing is a lifesaver, especially when you're in a lot of enemies around. You can hold that triangle button and it'll protect you from everything. R2 gets you into first person mode, and you'll use this sometimes. They definitely utilize it in some sections of the game, but you get a better aim at some things when you go into first person mode. The last thing you have is select. This is your main menu here of all your items, objectives, and everything. You can see all the items, weapons you got, and you can also see objectives and a map. This map is not all that great, I'll be honest with you, but it's nice to have just to see where you're at. This game is labeled as a third-person shooter, but I'll be honest with you guys, it definitely feels like an action-adventure game. If you go into this game running and gunning like you normally would in a third-person shooter, you're going to be a little disappointed, because there's a lot of stopping and progression things going on here. You have to stop and try to find security bolts or some kind of key to get to the next area, or you'll have to go through a bunch of different places that are connected, but you can't progress at all until you do something, like talk to an NPC or do something like that. It's a pretty linear game to its core, but you do venture out through small sections that are interconnected, like I said, and sometimes you'll have to go back and forth here and there. The beginning of the game is a lot like that. You go through the city, a ruined city, and you'll be battling a bunch of aliens and such as you go on. You'll find health, shields, and ammo all the time, and sometimes you'll find a new weapon along the way. This game is very objective heavy, so once you get one objective done, you move on to the next. Sometimes you'll fight a boss or have to keep on running, and you'll find more enemies, and there's a lot of puzzle solving in this game. When I say puzzle solving though, there's a lot of blocks you gotta move, so that's kind of what I mean, but they do get creative with it, with how they go and how you have to adjust the blocks. And of course cutting on certain monitors and such to cut on cranes or other things like that. The guns in this game are your usual suspects but effective. You actually start with this really cool like energy blade thing, and it's very effective, but it's your melee attack. To name some others, you get a machine gun that can shoot grenades, you get a laser rifle, and this one's my favorite. It's like this energy cannon thing. I swear this thing just defeats everything in the game. It's awesome. Not too often, but sometimes you'll come across a turret and you can get on this turret and just shred the enemies apart. This has only happened a few times in the game, so you can't get too used to that. But yeah, as far as your variety of weapons and such, it's pretty normal for a sci-fi shooter like this. This game comprises of 6 missions in the whole game, and when you're playing the game, you do have save points that you come across, these big wavy things, and I will tell you, make sure to utilize these. This is one of these games where you only have one life, you die, you get a game over, you go back to your last save, and if you didn't save it all, well, you restart the whole freaking game. So be sure to save a lot in this game, because this game, you will not know what to expect and what will kill you. The enemy variety starts kind of easy in the game. You fight these like claw aliens and some with guns, but as you get through halfway in the game, you'll see some other kind of stuff like some harder dudes, and it really reminds me of games like Halo in terms of the enemy variety. It's not too bad, and it gets progressively harder as the game goes on. There's not too many boss fights in the game either. There's a few through the game, and of course there is a final boss where you fight this big alien guy. But overall, the bosses, to me, were pretty easy to take down, especially they give you a lot of health and ammo when you're fighting them too. I'd say the difficulty lies really with the level design, and the levels themselves are pretty fun. They're all different, they're not perfect by any means, some are a little bit of a slog to get through, but they do a good job with making each level kind of different, and definitely making use of a very limited scenario here. You're in the city, in subway station, in an alien base, literally the whole game, but they do a very good job showing you what they can do to make these levels all feel different. C-12, I gotta say, was a really solid playthrough. This game definitely took me by surprise, and at first I honestly just didn't care for it with how the game played and the progression. I was getting stuck a lot, but when you play this game and actually truly figure out what you're supposed to do, and you don't look at it as just a third-person run-and-gunning kind of shooting game, you'll actually enjoy this game. It's pretty cool. It's definitely not a perfect game by any means though. The camera is very finicky sometimes, and with using the R1 to lock on, you gotta be very careful not to hit the left stick too hard to the left or right, or you'll break your aim. Once you learn that though, it's all good. Also, there's some janky moments in general, like this whole puzzle solving section right here with this crane. Dude, I could not figure this out. Maybe I'm just stupid, but it was just so frustrating, and just seeing the point of view of where you go. Things like that though, I can look past the small stuff like that. This game here is definitely a breath of fresh air, a good game to play on the PS1, especially made by Sony. This game also has a spooky atmosphere to it that I really like. The music's very ominous. It's like a survival horror type of sci-fi game, even though it's definitely not. But this is a cool game to play with the soundbar on, and C-12 Final Resistance definitely gets the approval from me. At least in North America, this game was never re-released ever again, so if you want to buy this game, you have to own it physically, but the good news is it's only around $12 or so complete in box. That's an absolute good deal for a very good quality game like this. This game didn't reinvent the wheel or anything, but if you like good old classic, sci-fi action, third-person shooters, or action-adventure games, C-12 Final Resistance is one you definitely got to check out. It may be one of the best action games on the console. It plays very well, the gameplay's good, it's not a very hard game either, in my opinion, so definitely a fun game to play through if you enjoy the PS1 library and have never heard of this one before. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. You enjoy this kind of content, be sure to give it a like. You got something to say? Leave a comment down below. And of course, if you want to see more content like this in the future, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks again for watching. Take it easy.